Welcome. In this video, we'll be discussing how to solve linear equations that involve multiple steps. So what I've written is a general strategy that can be used to solve equations of this type. And what I want to say before we get started is that the order isn't all that important. It's just sort of like a checklist that you can run through, but you won't be necessarily, say, like distributing to remove parentheses before you combine like terms. The order itself isn't all that important, but this is at least a checklist of things that you can keep in mind as you go through and solve. So, and I should also mention that not all of these things are going to apply to each problem. So let's take a look at number one and see if we can figure out how to do it using this general strategy. So number one is solving 2u minus 6 equals negative 10. Now remember, our goal for these problems when we're solving equations is to figure out what number u represents, which essentially means get u alone. And remember also that the left side of my equation right now is balanced perfectly with my right side. So whatever I do to one side of an equation, I have to do to the other. So let's run through the steps and see what we can come up with. So the first step says that we're supposed to clean up each side separately by doing what? Well, the first thing is distribute to remove parentheses. Well, we don't have any parentheses, so we can skip the first step. The next step is to clear fractions by multiplying by the least common denominator. Well, we don't have fractions, so we can skip that step. The next step is to combine like terms. Well, if I look at my left side, 2u minus 6, those aren't like terms. I can't combine them. And on the right side, I just have negative 10. So I can skip actually these first three steps. The second step, and this is assuming that you're solving for x, is to get x's on one side. In our case, that would be the u's, but they are already on one side. They're all on the left-hand side of my equation. So we've actually skipped all the steps up until this number 3. So number 3 says undo to get x alone. And the way we undo it is by undoing in the reverse order of operations. So that's where we can start because our u currently is not alone. So in order to get u alone, we have to undo two things. We have to undo this minus 6 and we have to undo the times 2. Well, which should we undo first? Well, again, we're going in reverse order of operations. So we're going to undo the subtraction and then undo the multiplication. So to undo this minus 6, we are going to add 6. And if I add 6 to one side of the equation, to balance it out, I have to add 6 to the other side. And now negative 6 and 6 makes 0. So those are gone. And I'm left with 2u equals negative 4. And now my last step is to undo times 2. So in order to undo times 2, I'm going to use division. So I'm going to divide the left side by 2, and when I do that, I also have to divide the right side by 2. And so my final answer is u equals negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. Okay, my last step in the process is to check. So I would check by plugging negative 2 back into the original equation to see if it works. So 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. Negative 4 minus 6 is negative 10. So we're good. Okay, let's try number 2. So number 2, again, if you ran through all the steps, we could skip all the steps up until number 3, which is the undo step. So number 3 tells me that I'm supposed to undo in the reverse order of operations. So I have to undo this times 4 and the minus 1 to get x alone. So I'm going to undo the minus 1 first by adding 1 to both sides. And so that gives me 4x equals negative 10. Because the negative 1 and 1 make 0. So then the last step is to get rid of this times 4. So to undo the times 4, I'm going to divide both sides by 4. And now notice this doesn't work out. Evenly, so I'm going to end up with a fraction. But I can reduce this a little bit. So if I divide top and bottom by 2, my final answer would be -5/2. Okay, I want you to try numbers 3 and 4. Pause the video and then restart when you've had an opportunity to try them. So for number 3, again, we need to undo the times 5 and the plus 2. So to undo the plus 2, we're going to minus 2 from both sides. That leaves 5z equals 15. And then to undo the times 5, we're going to use division. So again, we've got to do both sides. So our final answer is z equals 3. And then for number 4, we have to undo times 6 and minus 1. So if we undo the minus 1 first, I'm left with 6x equals 24. And then divide both sides by 6. And we're left with x equals 4 for an answer.